It's time for another Dirt Daily, and today's episode is presented by ARB. ARB is an off-road aftermarket company that you've probably heard of if you spent any time off-roading or building up a 4x4. ARB is most well known for their air lockers, which is a air-actuated locking differential that when it's inside the differential and activated, it sends power evenly to both tires. But ARB is not just air lockers. ARB also has a full line of suspension, the Old Man Emu line. You can probably remember when we installed those on my dirty 80 series Land Cruiser. They also are known for their body armor. Their bull bars have been around for ages. In fact, ARB has been around almost 50 years. They're originally based in Australia, and then over the years they have spread all over the globe. You can find ARB products on off-road vehicles just about in every country. And some other things that ARB is known for is the fridge freezers and a whole line of kind of camping overlanding gear. But today, we're going to install an ARB component that is not as well known, a set of under vehicle protection, or as we call it here in America, skid plates. That's right. Today, we're going to install some ARB skid plates on this truck right here, which if you don't recall, let me give you a little whoop. That's the Bronco Truck. That is the truck that we built on Dirt Every Day a couple years ago. And since then, it's kind of been mothballed, and I wanted to do some cool new upgrades to it. And in fact, that is an ARB bull bar on the front of it. Those are ARB lights, and today we're going to put on some ARB skid plates. Under vehicle protection. Let's get to work. Before we dive into the skid plates under vehicle protection, let's talk about what this truck is. The Bronco Truck. This truck was a really cool opportunity we had when we were on Dirt Every Day to build kind of a concept vehicle where we took a brand new Ford four-door Bronco Badlands edition and turned it into a pickup truck, a regular cab two-door pickup truck. The underpinnings of this truck have not really changed from stock. Like, we didn't really touch the chassis other than adding a little bit to the back of it. We didn't have to cut it and shorten it or stretch the wheelbase. The suspension's all original. The axles are all original. It had lockers in it from the factory, which was cool with the Badlands edition. What we did do, though, was cut off the back of the body and put a new bed on the back. And that bed is from a company called Aqualoo out of Canada. They make aluminum bodies for Jeeps, Toyota Land Cruisers, Land Rovers, Suzuki Samurais. What the bed is that we have is the bed off of an FJ45, so which is the pickup truck version of the FJ40 Land Cruiser. And so it gives it this really kind of what I call outback Australian truck look, where it's kind of looks like an Aussie truck that you'd see way out in the deserts of Australia. As such, it has an ARB bull bar on the front, and it has these tall, skinny, super lug tires, a 916 LT, on just stock steel Ford Bronco wheels. I just really wanted it to look kind of like it would almost come this way from the factory. Some of the things that we did, there was a bunch of body work that Dave did on the back corners of the cab, and then we built this sort of structure underneath that soft top. That soft top is actually left over from a Jeep M715, and we modified it to attach to the windshield, but then we had to build this wacky structure under it to make it stick tight and not be kind of all flappy in the wind. I don't 100% love that top. It looks cool from the distance. When you get up close, it was kind of a TV truck project where at the last minute we were like, how are we going to make this work? And we made it work, but I think I want to come back at some point and either change the top or build a different top or come up with a different solution for the top of the Bronco truck. But the cool thing is that because it's a Bronco and because we didn't really modify it on the show, we can now do those things. We can add skid plates, we could modify the suspension if we wanted to at some point, and it's basically just a stock Bronco. It's a really good one. It's the one with the 4-cylinder. It has the 7-speed manual transmission with the crawler gear. Overall, it's a really cool truck, and now I think we can make some adjustments to it. It does come with skid plates. However, I'm going to show you, we're going to dive underneath, and I'm going to show you that those skid plates, as substantial as they are, they do leave a little bit to be desired, and hopefully the ARB kit will replace that and improve upon what's already there. So you can order a Bronco with or without skid plates. This Bronco has actually a lot of skid plates. It has a really good gas tank skid plate, which is one I definitely recommend you order. It also has a small skid plate underneath the back of the transfer case. It has a little tiny skid plate that covers kind of the front half of the transmission. And then there's kind of a front axle differential skid plate, and then sort of the front skid plate going up to the front bumper. What it doesn't have is anything right in the middle here, which is where the exhaust crosses over, where the front drive shaft goes from the transfer case up to the front axle, and the bottom of the aluminum transmission is basically kind of hanging out there in the wind. It's tucked up, but if there was a rock with a big old point and you drug it over this skid plate and it went up in here, not only could you get bellied out, but you could hypothetically crack the case, crush the exhaust, damage the front drive shaft, and be in a whole world of hurt. So the ARB kit it'll cover these same things, plus it will fill in this gap in the middle, and so it'll protect a little bit of everything. These skid plates are not a terrible option if you're ordering a vehicle, but you may also want to look online and price check versus the factory skid plate or going with the ARB kit, which covers more of the belly of the beast. This one underneath the gas tank, I definitely recommend. I think that's a good one to go with because I don't think ARB offers one in this location, and it's pretty substantial. It's actually double thickness in some places, so I think that is definitely a good way to go. These trucks are, I want to say 116-inch wheelbase on the four-door, so you have a lot of belly, and if you don't lift it, you keep it kind of stock, having skid plates is a really important thing to do to protect all the vital parts of the vehicle. The drive shaft, which runs right down from transfer case, it's kind of hanging out there, but that's kind of the way it always is. The exhaust goes down the driver's side of the chassis, but it is above the bottom of the frame rail, so it's semi-protected. At the end of the day, you could damage just about anything if you get in the wrong situation. But I think having skid plates is a really good upgrade because it allows you to take a vehicle that maybe isn't as overbuilt, doesn't have as big a tire, but you can still run trails and kind of crawl your way over things, slide your way over things by having this underbody protection. I got the factory skid plates off, and I don't know if a lot of you have seen the bottom of the new Bronco. The new Bronco is actually a pretty neat truck. Right up here is a disconnectable sway bar, much like the Wrangler Rubicon has or the Ram Power Wagon, but they're using it with independent front suspension. In front here is the rack and pinion, and I think there are two different rack and pinions. One of them is a little bit beefier than the other one. I have heard good and bad things about them. I know there is some aftermarket people making stuff to beef that up. I don't know what the latest is. I'm not running very big tires on the Bronco truck, so I'm not really too concerned about the steering, but I do know that there has been issues where you put bigger parts on. Bigger tires can break these big parts. But the part that I think is really neat that a lot of people aren't talking about is this manual transmission. This is the 7-speed. It's got 6 gears plus a crawler gear plus reverse. So it's actually, I guess you could say it's an 8-speed. But what's neat is that if you look right up here on the side, these two orange things, there's one and there's one, those are cables. Those are like the ends of the cables to these shift arms, and that is what engages and disengages the transmission. So the shift tower inside doesn't actually go into the transmission. It runs these two push-pull cables down and shifts these arms on the side of the transmission. A little convoluted, a little complex, maybe something to wear out, but also something really cool if you wanted to build something custom, say a vehicle where you are not sitting in this factory spot. Maybe you want to sit up over the front axle, or you want to sit farther back. If you wanted to swap this drivetrain into something else, like for me, I have like a cab over Jeep truck, and whenever guys modify those and hot rod them, they almost always have to go to an automatic because you're basically sitting beside the engine and the transmission is behind you. Where in this case, you could find one of these transmissions, which I think is a Get-Trag, and you'll have a crawler gear. You have 6 speeds, so you have a lot of high speeds for driving, and you would have this sort of push-pull cable system that you could then mount up beside the engine and still have a manual transmission. So, I don't know, kind of neat. This truck has like a 300 horsepower 4-cylinder. I think it's only a 2.3 liter, but with the crawler gears in that, I think it's a pretty good match, and it's a fun little truck to drive. But that being said, I'm pretty sure this transmission is probably not cheap, so let's put some skid plates on it to protect it so that if we do get out in the trails or in the rocks, we don't punch a hole in it. I'm going to show you a little trick that is great to do whenever you're doing an install on your project truck, project vehicle, but a lot of us don't do it. Most of the time when you get a kit of some sort, suspension, bumper, skid plates, it's going to come with a pile of hardware. Usually there's a bag with all the hardware just thrown in it. Sometimes you'll find kits that have all the hardware laid out perfectly, labeled and everything. Most of the time it's just jumbled mess. I like these. These are hardware gauges. You can get these from different places. You can probably find them online. This one from Fastenal is awesome because it not only has the bolt hole sizes, but it also has the thread pitch kind of embossed into it, molded into it, so you can double check that the bolts match the size that you should have. Most of the time the instructions will have a hardware list, and then as you're going through the instructions, it'll tell you which bolt or fastener to use. And so having these is great because not only can you lay out the hardware, some of us can eyeball bolts and know instantly what it is after years and years of working on projects. Others cannot do that and can never do that. Or maybe you're new at it, or maybe you just don't have that part of your brain that allows you to just eyeball that and be like, oh, that's metric, or oh, that's standard. Or maybe that's the other thing. Maybe you grew up with metric vehicles, Toyotas, Suzukis, and then you buy an old Jeep and you're like, well, I don't know, is that a 3/8? That looks like a 10 millimeter, and back and forth. So don't be scared to grab some of these things, verify your parts, lay them all out if you have the time, and make sure that you have everything that's on the hardware list. And then when you're actually installing the vehicle, this will be one less step of running around trying to find all the bolts. And trust me, kits, sometimes the kits, whatever brand it is, somebody forgets to put a fastener in, or they put too many fasteners in, and you end up and you're like, well, what is this for? So if you verify on the list with the hardware on the bench, then you have some idea of if you have extra parts or not enough parts. Let's put some skid plates on. The first step is there are 2 brackets like this that go right behind the sway bar. In fact, you're actually going to remove this nut that holds the sway bar to the chassis, and then it will sandwich this bracket and the nut will hold everything up in place. There's another slotted hole right here that lines up with a threaded hole in this sway bar bracket. That hole was probably used on the factory skid plate, and now we will use it on the ARB kit. It'll help to hold this bracket up. The other thing is on the side of the chassis, you'll see how this bracket has a little tab that sticks up, and that has a hole in it so that one of those metric bolts can screw into that and help hold this up against there. Now, there's no threaded nut inside there, and it's kind of buried. You can't get your fingers to it. However, ARB has supplied these. This is basically a nut welded to a piece of metal that is, they call it either a stick nut or a wand nut. It's also kind of like a flag nut, where basically you will bend this up so it can fit in that hole through a bracket right here and then line up so the nut is behind that. I've already bent one. You can see how kind of weird and twisted it gets. The instructions kind of show what you want it to do. I basically eyeballed it off of the chassis to figure out, all right, I want this to be inside the frame right there. There's also a little tiny hole in the bottom of the frame here, and I find it easy if you kind of start this and then grab your flashlight. Where did I put my flashlight? There it is, in my pocket. And kind of scope up through there, and you'll be able to see a weird little hole inside of this cross member kind of support piece. And then if you can see it there in the camera, the nut is lining up on the back side of that hole. So don't worry about all of this. You can either trim it off later, but for now, we're going to get that lined up, and you'll see that this bolt will screw right into that. Once it has everything attached to it, once I have the bracket in line, it'll pull everything and line it up flush, and then you'll have a fastener inside the chassis. So first thing, pull this off, put this bracket up there like that, and then we'll run this nut through that slotted hole in the back and into that flag nut, stick nut, wand nut, whatever you want to call it. Here we go. Get that guy just started, and then we'll take this off and feed this through, and there we go. There we go. Once this tightens up and we pull that tight, everything will be all flush up the way we want it to be. And we'll duplicate it on this side as well. Next step, there's a cross member underneath the back of the transmission right in front of the transfer case, and there's a hole here. This is the hole that attaches, you can get access to the transmission mount. And in the bottom of that hole, there is kind of it's like an oval shaped hole that has like a little lip around it, like it was pressed in. The ARB kit comes with this. They call it the chassis nut plate. And the way it will work is it's gonna feed up inside this hole and then hook over the lip of the hole, and then we'll center that. Now, right now it's just gonna sit up in there and kind of lock in place based on the lip of that hole, but eventually the skid plate will come back to this and fasteners will go up there and attach, kind of sandwich everything. Now we can actually put the plates on. We got some brackets mounted up as supports. Now we'll actually go and put some plates up. So the ARB skid plate kit is actually 4 different skid plates, or as they call it, UVP, under vehicle protection. There's the front UVP that goes from the cross member that is in front of the axle up to the front bumper. It protects the bottom of the radiator and the intercooler. Then there is the front diff UVP, which is underneath the axle itself, underneath the steering rack, and underneath the engine oil pan. I am not sure if there's a provision in it To change the oil, you may actually have to drop this one piece off. Once we have it up there, I'll be able to figure out if that's what's going to happen anytime you do an oil change. The third section is the transmission UVP, which runs from basically underneath the disconnectable sway bar and back to that cross member that we just installed, that little nut plate. That is where this will attach. And then there's this kind of triangular wing-shaped piece that goes over underneath the back of the transfer case. So we're actually starting with the middle one here, the one underneath the front diff. Then we'll move to the front piece, and then we work our way back, all the way back to the transfer case. I'm going to start with 2 fasteners right here and right here. We're actually going to put those in first because the front 2 holes on the skid plate that goes underneath here are slotted. So you want to get those in, then you can kind of slide it into place, hold it up with one hand, and then get the other bolts installed. So this will come up here, slot over those guys, and then the back 2 fasteners will also line up with some threaded holes in the chassis. So looking at this, you definitely do not have access to the oil pan if you want to do an oil change, but you'll just undo these back 2 bolts, slide it out, keep those, you'll just crack those loose, and then this will drop out, and then you can do the oil change. The next section, the front section, is going to attach to 2 mounting points here and here on the chassis, 2 welded in nuts that are on the bottom of this middle skid plate, and then a bolt that will go into the chassis right here. So that does complicate things a little bit as far as doing an oil change, because this front piece actually sits below this middle piece. So when you do an oil change, you're probably going to have to remove both this section and that. I really need to talk to ARB and see if they have any plans to put either a drain hole right here, or maybe even like a funnel type system, so that if you're up in here and you remove the oil plug, could it just have a funnel system and the oil would just pull up and come right out through the bottom of this skid plate. All right, let's get that piece on. So I'm going to hold this up here. I'm going to basically feed it up above this kind of splash guard of the bumper, and then there's 3 slotted holes in these that I'll actually line up with some bolts that are on the skid plate. So it'll be above that, then below this, and then below this. And it will protect all your radiator and intercooler system. All right, this is going to come up above the bumper, and then there we go. And then this needs to slide that way a little. And let's see if we can, oh boy. There we go. We can get this one fastener started. We won't have a skid plate fall on our head. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is shift this whole thing. That's weird. This wants to, oh boy, oh boy. This wants to live right there. Cool. We have one holding it up, And then over here, let's see here. There we go. Over here, there's another threaded hole. Right there. Okay. Now it's stable. Now we can try and get these guys lined up. Good. Good, good. There we go. Those are going. Nice. I got the front skid plate on. There are 2 fasteners out here, and then 3 across the back. There's also 3 small little button head Allen bolts that are stainless steel, where the splash guard bolts into the skid plate. I don't like stainless steel fasteners on automobiles. I feel like they always gall up. They're kind of junky. They look nice and they don't rust, but other than that, like, I just don't care for them. So I did put some anti-seize on them to try and keep the threads from galling up. Since this is black, if I was doing it myself, I would probably ditch all this and just put some black fasteners on. They might rust, but you wouldn't have the stainless. But that's what's in the kit, so that's what we installed. Now we're gonna move to the transmission protector, under vehicle protector, which will go from this cross member underneath the back of the axle to the cross member that is under the transfer case. Moving on to the transmission skid plate. This is actually the most beneficial over the factory style because it's going to span from this cross member all the way to this cross member and protect the transmission. I did put 3 bolts in already in the front because this plate is slotted in the front, so you can see how the slotted holes will slide up and over those 3 bolts before I tighten them down. Now, the next step, as I hold this up on top of my head, is to put bolts in, not only in the bolt plate that is in this cross member, but also through these gussets and into the threaded holes out on the edge here. I grabbed a shallow socket and put it on an extension, and that'll allow me to kind of push the bolt up through the hole and also get it started. So let's see, I think we'll start over here and kind of gently feed that guy up in there. See if we can get it to start. If you can get one started, then it helps hold everything into place for the other ones. It's just getting one of them started. Come on, you. There it goes, there it goes, I think. Nope. Let's try back here. And oh, I got it. Rear's a little tricky because that nut plate wants to kind of wiggle around in there. But I got one started, and then the other one should line right up. Also handy to have a flashlight and sometimes like a little screwdriver to kind of help get all the holes lined up. Come on, you. we go. Yeah, come on. Got it. All right, so those two are at least started. And now I can get these two side bolts started. There is okay, found a little problem, not a problem, opportunity. These outer wings that go up to those gussets, I don't think all of the Broncos probably have that threaded hole on the top of that gusset. And this one does. ARB sends a bolt with a flange nut and you can access it from the top. Because this is a threaded hole and it's up there already and it's lined up where this would go, I'm going to revert to the factory hardware on these outer two locations. And then I will have the factory style bolt, which can just thread into the chassis, which is already there. I guess you could also go and you could also get up in there and knock that bolt off and put the flange nut on, but I think going with factory hardware is an easier fix in this situation. All right. All right, I'm not going to tighten up everything just yet. I'm going to get this final transfer case skid plate on and hopefully it'll all line up and we will be wrapping this thing up. I found that the back section of my transfer case, there's two bolts that go into the side of the chassis here. And if the chassis had skid plates on it before, you can reuse the factory bolts. If it didn't, you would put the other sort of a flag nut bolt up inside there. Mine did, so I'm just going to reuse the factory stuff. And then there's two spots up here in the front that will also thread into this cross member. So I need to get the washers and everything for those. And then there's a third one, which I believe is back here at this strap on the gas tank. This is going to basically come up here, slide over that, go up to that cross member, and then also grab this big gas tank bolt that is right up here. So there's a bolt on the gas tank skid plate. So I need to remove that and feed it up through this back hole of the skid plate. So I think we pull that out and then we kind of fit everything. If that drops down, I may need to put the transmission jack under here to kind of force everything back up. There's a lot of dirt and gravel up on top of this skid plate for some reason. Like some guys took it four-wheeling. Let's see, what size is that big guy? Is it any of these that I already have out? Yeah. Oh, oh. That's not it. What size is it? That's a 19. I must have an 18. Okay. Oh yeah, that bolt's gonna be perfect. This is the plan. We come up here and we slide it. This also has slotted bolts, which is kind of nice because it makes it a little bit easier to get the plates started. All right. That one's in there. These two are in there. And then we'll grab a bolt out of our pocket and come on, just start. Yeah, there we go. Let's put this big guy back in, back here. Nice and tight. Cool. Nice. These two are tight. That one's tight. The front of this needs tightened. I like it. I dig it. I feel like the skid plate system is much stronger, much more tucked up, and it also covers a lot more of the belly of the Bronco truck. The front is tied in. It's a little bit narrower than the old one. The old one used to stick out here, but that might be good, especially if you're running a bigger tire. It used to stick out into these corners more. I'm not gonna lie, I did like the old skid plate. I thought it was well built, but I feel like this kit is more substantial. It covers more of the bottom of the truck. The transmission is protected. The transfer case has more connecting points, so it's less likely to get bent up, where before it was kind of just hanging out and was on 2 planes, and now it has 3 connectors, so it's kind of more of a triangle. Overall, it went pretty good. I do wish it had an access hole in this area for a some sort of panel that you could remove when you do the oil change. There's actually 4 holes right here. I think maybe in the future, depending on if they don't come up with a solution, maybe I could build something that would bolt on in these 3 spots or these 4 spots, and then have a panel that you would remove. That would be easy. You just cut it out, build sort of a plate, and have some fasteners on the top side that it would grab to. But overall, I'm pretty stoked on it. That's it for this Dirt Daily. Thanks for tuning in. Again, go check out ARB. ARB has a brand new website. They now have a website where you can go and buy parts. They used to just be dealer only at off-road shops all over America. Now, if your local dealer doesn't have what you're looking for, or you're not really sure what you're looking for, you can go to their website, arbusa.com, get on, type in the information for your vehicle, and search all of the different things that they offer for it. They just started this website like a couple months ago, so they're still kind of filling it in with all of the products that they offer. But they offer a lot of stuff for a lot of different vehicles and a lot of different types of things: suspension, skid plates, bumpers, lights, lockers. So go check it out. That's it for this Dirt Daily. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Pew. Hey, Bronco Truck, what are we gonna do next?